What happens when gods intervene, but justice hides in the shadows? Can vengeance survive divine mercy? If salvation comes from above, who answers from below? When brothers become adversaries, can they ever truly end up on the same side? Find out this and more. Where? Here on Free Your Mind. Hit it. Location, Cartier Bay Avian, Gloss City. A quick pulse interrupted the quiet. Footsteps and a shadow moved quickly from it. The Dark Avenger scaled across the buildings near the riverfront. He stopped atop one of many that overlooked the harbor. He knew this was the one he needed, specifically. He was searching for something. A docked ship, the ASC Tybalt. It was its majestic presence in these waters at this time of night that caught his attention. To the average person, there was nothing abnormal about it being here, but the shadowy figure immediately knew something was off. He tapped the side of his helmet, and his vision was immediately aided. He zoomed in closer and saw the problem. Besides the fact that people were moving about in the middle of the night, he noticed the real crew had been tied up. He could see them through the lower deck windows. The imposters that moved around freely had the standard weapons, swords, maces, bows and arrows, etc. There it is. Hawk noticed something odd holstered to some of them. These thugs had iron shooters at their sides. He would need to follow up with Gia, inform her and her connection at ITO about this. This was confirmation that he was in the right place. He found what he was looking for. Idiots. Hawk scoffed at them. They thought being hidden under darkness was a safe way to operate. He was sure they felt they would be safe from the wrath of Team Dragon Force. True as this may be, the golden mop head was not the one they should be worried about. They would not stay hidden from him. Hawk knew that it was the Dark Avenger that was a threat, much greater than the flying golden moose knuckle. Across the way, he saw both the standard buggies and the new luxury stretch ones. More armed thugs were looking around while others loaded up the buggies with the stolen bounty. Stealthily, he moved to the back of the building, peeking through one of the windows lined across the ceiling. He identified his target. The dusty-looking rag doll of a man standing around giving direction had to be the leader. Ready to stop this injustice, he moved swiftly along the building's top, undetected. Hawk still watched them as he moved about. Now that he had gotten to the adjacent rear corner across from where he was, he finally found his opening. Hawk jumped down, landed on the above scaffolding, and disappeared back into the darkness. He was pleased with himself and his accomplished stealth. They had no idea what was coming. "Hurry up, Cassius," yelled the Raggedy Man. "We don't have much time." Sledge, the ringleader of this band of miscreants, stood recklessly upon 3 levels of wooden crates. He was prideful not in just overseeing such a task, but in being elevated above everyone else. Fearfully, his men quickened their pace as they worked to stack up the mystery boxes. Suddenly, something caused Cassius to look up. Frozen in fear, he began mumbling sounds, trying to make words. Instead, a scream came out, the same fear triggering him to drop the crate in his hands. After stumbling back a few steps, Cassius turned and ran hysterically toward the exit. Jewels and gemstones mined from the mountainsides of Naden fell out onto the ground, scattering as the crate crashed. "It's a demon!" Cassius finally managed to scream out his words. Sledge gasped as he saw Cassius trip and take a nosedive. The goon's body skidded across the ground upon impact. When it stopped its forward momentum, Cassius' body just twitched as he just laid there unconsciously. Sledge turned to see what Cassius had ran from, noticing his legs had been bound by something. The ringleader's eyes widened at the realization that something dark was descending from the rafters. A figure, its huge feathered wings spread wide, was getting closer and closer to him. The Dark Avenger reveled in the fear that grew more intensely across the unkept leader's face until SHUH! Hawk expertly drop-kicked the ringleader. The force of the kick sent Sledge sailing through the air. He crashed hard into a pile of crates that had been unloaded and stacked. The force of the impact caused their contents to be spilled out everywhere. Iron shooters! Hawk's suspicions were now confirmed. Purveying the contraband that now littered the floor, Hawk went on the move. Sledge's henchmen stared at their leader, who was sprawled out unconscious upon the floor. Almost in unison, the same henchman looked up and toward the intruder, who now stood upon the crates where Sledge once did. The Dark Avenger decided to put himself in a more strategic position, knowing he had an incoming battle on his hands. Who's next? Hawk taunted, his voice low and gravelly. The shaken crew reluctantly inched towards him. Hawk smirked under his helmet as his foes grabbed for their swords, knives, and other handheld weapons. Knives were thrown and flaming arrows began flying at him as he bobbed and weaved through them. He noticed some had aimed these iron shooters right at him also. Hawk wasn't completely sure how his armor would hold up at this range. The vigilante hero quickly grappled up into the ceiling, pulling himself into the air. This maneuver allowed him to glide down in their direction, having a better view of everything. The Dark Avenger began twirling as he got closer. As he spun, his razor-sharp wings protected him from the projectiles and sliced and diced through his attackers that were close enough. As they fell to either side of him, their blood splattered everywhere. The Dark Avenger landed gently upon his feet with a kneeling stance. As Hawk braced himself with his fist against the floor, his sharp, aggressively winged cape softened as it fell. It blanketed gently across him and the ground. He couldn't believe he didn't see the manly hulk of a woman who grabbed him from behind. Helga! Rip him apart! Sledge yelled from the floor, wrestling to stand. He had managed to awaken from his blackout, but was pissed beyond words. You've made a mistake showing up here, little man. She manhandled Hawk as he struggled. He was still in shock that Helga held him up by his neck. She grabbed his helmet with the other hand as Hawk flailed about. Now you must die. I, Helga Ingolfsson, will crush you. Hawk's legs kicked frantically as he gasped for air while fighting to keep his helmet on. He decided to cease his struggle, knowing he had to change tactics. Instead, he pulled two little handheld objects the same shape as the bird emblem upon his chest and zoom, threw them behind her. Ha ha! You need better aim, little man. Helga laughed, thinking she'd dodged his attack. Spinning around and around, the little metal birdarangs changed direction. They crossed one another, reversing back towards her. With great force, they pierced her flesh and embedded into her neck. This caused her to cry out in agony. Ah! She screamed, dropping him. Helga reached back and grabbed at her neck. Quickly, Hawk knocked her off her feet with a sweeping kick, causing her to fall back. The little sharp birdies jammed deeper into her neck. She laid there gasping as the blood began to flood her throat. Hawk towered over her, looking around the room and studying the others. Sledge and his men had already begun moving in on him, caging him in. He stood there patiently in front of them all, waiting for Sledge to get closer. You have been caught, my friend. Fledge smirked, limping toward his new prisoner. Hawk was satisfied that his foe was still pained from the dropkick. A smile crept across Sledge's face, showing his gemstone-capped teeth. His words were the cue he needed. The all-bum rushed him at once, grabbing at his arms and legs. With a growling chuckle, Sledge stated what he thought was the truth. Time to die, Dark Avenger. I don't think so. A voice came from the building's entryway, echoing across the space. Everyone stopped and stared in that direction. A look of shock filled the room soon after. T-Bolt floated there, his arms folded, and his cape flowing behind him elegantly. Some impulsively attacked him, thinking they had a chance. Others knew better and ran, trying to escape. Projectile fire zipped through the room, accompanied by flaming arrows, all aimed at him. T-Bolt watched them fall to the floor, never piercing his body. You people and your useless weapons, he snarled, his eyes and body surging with power. Suddenly, the sound of thunder rumbled above them, vibrating the building. Now, who wants to surrender? The lot of them cowered in fear before the presence of a god. Realizing it was over, they all went to their knees. Most were folded down before him in prayer, waiting as T-Bolt signaled the constable and his deputies to come inside. Some were busy with the ESC tumult, while others were stationed outside to catch the runners as they exited. You saved the day again, T-Bolt. Constable Urich extended his hand, waiting for just a touch from one of his gods. The crew of the Tybalt has been set free, and we will make sure all the cargo makes it where it should. Thank you for the backup, T-Bolt overlooked the greeting, handing him an iron shooter left on the ground instead. These weapons are becoming more popular amongst the criminals. Any idea where they are coming from? Asked the constable. T-Bolt didn't. But Prince Daniel was surely going to speak to his naval buddy, Captain Sean Caleb, about it. Unable to shake that he finally saw this Dark Avenger vigilante, T-Bolt's mind wandered away from the conversation, and the constable realized his hope of touching his golden idol had passed. We will take care of the rest from here, T-Bolt, Constable Urich informed him, tipping his hat while walking away from the golden one. Ulrich had no idea who it was that tipped them off about this whole operation, but he was glad that it brought him close to T-Bolt. Thank you again, Constable Ulrich, he replied while moving away in the opposite direction. He began scanning the area, looking around for the vigilante. He must be hiding, the godly one thought as he hovered above the mess below. There is no way he escaped. T-Bolt huffed to himself, finally giving up. Disappointed, he began heading toward the exit. He looked back into the building one more time before exiting the scene. The Dark Avenger watched his brother, still hidden in the shadows of the building's exterior. Soon, brother. Hawk's voice was gruff. The wind of the night air billowed his winged cape. Hawk watched as T-Bolt dashed back through the air toward the heart of the city. Someone had tipped off both his brother and the constable, but who? He tapped his helmet. Exit. A magic door opened before him. Someone on the other end prompted him to respond. No. The penthouse. All right, we've come to the end of the reading for this section of Prelude to the Secret War. And now we're going to move on to the author's corner. All right, folks, that was Prelude to the Secret War, Part 2. So what have we learned about T-Bolt? What have we learned about Hawk? Well, I've got a few questions for you. Actually, they're probably more for myself. Well, we're going to answer these together, okay? Question number 1. What makes the Seven Kingdoms heroes so iconic, yet morally complex? Well, the contrast between T-Bolt's overt magic and Hawk's covert tactics. The morality isn't black or white. It's drawn in deep shadow and radiant flame. How so? Well, they are brothers, right? And Hawk is very passionate. And T-Bolt's very hard-headed, it feels. So, question number 2. How do gods and vigilantes coexist and conflict within the same narrative space? Well, I would say that the tension between the two have nothing to do with their own personal, not vendettas, what's that word? Their own personal agendas. Their personal agendas. So T-Bolt is the, I want to protect all of Avian. I'm their champion. Nothing gets by me. Hawk's more like there's things going on that aren't being addressed, and only I can take care of that. Who needs the big golden buffoon? Who needs some shiny, glittery, bare-chested moose knuckle of a hero? Hawk doesn't think that they need that. He thinks that he's enough for that. So yeah, I just scratched my head. I'm not cutting that out. We're going to keep going, guys. Okay, next question. What design choices help distinguish your mythic characters from traditional superheroes? Ooh. Well, divine authority doesn't always equate to moral superiority. In this world, symbols wield just as much weight as strength. Divine authority, T-Bolt. Moral superiority, I don't think Hawk has that. I think he's more. It's a little different. I think it's definitely that Superman Batman dynamic. Superman is the cowboy who you don't really see Superman out at nighttime flying around unless he's just bored or something. Batman operates in shadow. Hawk operates in shadow, right? So it's that same kind of duality. And it's really, I'm gonna be honest with you, I really just wanted, those are my favorite superheroes, besides my own, of course. But that's what they were based on. Well, the Hawk one was, T-Bolt is more Thor-ish in a way, definitely Superman-like, kind of like the baby of Superman and Thor. If I mash them together, and then you just go from there. But that's the difference in the weight and the strength of the two symbols that they are. Okay. Anyways, hope that brought some clarity for that. The next question: Why is duality between brothers so central to your storytelling? Well, you know, I look at my own relationships with my siblings. I've got, a handful of them. But the main one, that sibling and I, we are like night and day. We're really like night and day. And being like night and day, we have to find that commonality that kind of like brings us together. You know, here they don't have that yet, right? They're very much on the opposite ends of the spectrum as people. They're both princes, so they have their princely duties and they have to act accordingly in person. It's very much, I would say, like Prince William and Prince Harry. They're totally two different people that, you know, have put themselves on in two different directions, honestly. But they're still brothers and they still get along, right? And I really think that this shows the hard part of that, where they haven't found that common ground yet. So all right. Well, my actual answer that I was going to say before I kind of like went off on a tangent was that as far as the story goes, you have to have a good villain. Well, Hawk's not the villain. Casey's not the villain, but there's enough conflict between him and his brother to where his brother definitely vilifies the Hawk character that is the Dark Avenger running around the city, according to his father, who knows everything. So, you know, I think he is really trying to put the two of them together eventually because they don't know who each other are. Well, Casey knows who Daniel is. Daniel doesn't know who Casey is yet in the story. So, if you look at it from a villain's standpoint, you're building the villain first, and then you kind of build off of that with your hero, which makes the story um, strong, and it fuels the myth and sharpens the stakes in the whole thing. All right. Okay. This is our last question. All right. How do you balance grand stakes with intimate moments in a scene like Hawk's rooftop scene? Wow. Okay. Well, I told you that he is very Batman centric because Batman's my favorite superhero of all time. Anybody that knows me knows this for a fact. Okay. So, Hawk, who I've based off of what my father called himself when he was into CBs and stuff, he had a handle that was similar to this. So, I just kind of borrowed that a little bit in honor of him. So that character is definitely a Batman type character in the ways of, oh, he's on the rooftops and stuff like that. But honestly, if when you read the book, I kind of switch him up a little bit because of the way the story kind of like flows, right? So if you're reading along and you've actually you've read past me, which is a wonderful thing, for you to kind of like take that initiative and just read this story on your own. You will see that growth of the character from just being on rooftops. But I thought it was wonderfully done as far as me putting him in that environment and making something so dark in a place that's supposed to be full of light and magic and everything else. He's definitely the opposite of that and still a hero at the same time. So, yeah. Anyways, I digress. This has been the Author's Corner. You have just completed part 2 of my prelude to the Secret War, right? Which is what this chapter is called, Secret War, the Secret War. It's a part 1 and a part 2 in the book. We are now in part 1, And I think there's maybe one or two other parts to this part one story before it transitions to the next part. Now, I want to remind you that we will not be reading this whole entire book, right? This is really me just kind of getting you started, right? We're going to have a stopping point, and then it'll be up to you to finish what we started. Once again, this has been the Author's Corner. I'm Quentin, your host for Free Your Mind, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. All right? Now, go with God. See ya.